welcome to a special edition of Talking Insights in celebration of International Market Research Week. I'm Gabby Kusters, Head of Marketing and Events at ESOMAR, and this week we're going to be diving into various themes, starting today with a focus on advocacy for data privacy and protection, along with advancement and enforcement of ethical standards. And our first topic is a detailed exploration of the ESOMAR and WAPOR study on the freedom to conduct and publish opinion polls. It's going to feature insights from experts at YouGov, WAPOR, and of course ESOMAR, and this study highlights the crucial role of opinion polls in informed decision-making and also discusses challenges, including methodological criticisms and the difficulties in publishing results, especially, of course, during election periods. And joining me today to delve into these issues is Kathleen Frankovic, a member of the ESOMAR committee and a consultant at YouGov in public opinion research. Welcome, Kathy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. I'm Kathleen Frankovic, and currently I'm a member of the Professional Standards Committee of ESOMAR. And I've been a member for quite a while now and have worked on all the projects associated with the PSC about public opinion polling, because that's my history. I spent more than 30 years at CBS News as the Director of Surveys, responsible for the CBS News polls and the CBS News New York Times poll. After 2000, I was also responsible for election projections. I'm a political scientist. In fact, I even taught for a few years at the University of Vermont and have been a visiting professor elsewhere. I am now a consultant. I've consulted for a variety of organizations. Most importantly, I think at the moment, it's YouGov America, where I've associated with them for more than 9 years. So it's been a long time. I do data analysis for the YouGov Economist public opinion polls. I should probably also add that I've been active in international and national organizations. I've served as president of APOR, the American Association for Public Opinion Research, and WAPOR, which is the World Association for Public Opinion Research. I think that's enough about me.
That's a very elaborate introduction, and like I said, I would not have served you justice if I did it myself, so thank you for that. I think I'm just going to jump into it. We have you here today because you have completely contributed to a very important piece of report that we put out called the Freedom to Conduct and Publish Opinion Poll. Obviously, you work together with WAPOR and a lot of other international project team leaders in the field. So that's why we wanted you here today to actually touch base on this, especially now that this year we have so many global elections happening everywhere. So before we even get into the questions, Kathy, what is the report about? Can you give me a little bit of a summary to those who haven't downloaded the report yet?
Well, it's a very long report, so I understand if people have not downloaded it yet. This is a study, global study of the issues surrounding the conduct and the publication of public opinion surveys. This year, we have a study that involves 157 countries. It's the seventh study. The projects began in 1984, so we have 7 studies. It has grown immeasurably since then. The first report in 1984 involved just over 40 countries, mostly in Europe and North America. And now it's fair to say that this is global. The countries that are missing, obviously, would be countries which do not have elections or public opinion polls. And there are about 24 of them in our report. And the countries that we really could not collect the data from are the countries, many of them are in West Asia or North Africa. So basically around the Mediterranean and eastward. But this project was conducted with WAPOR. It was the leader for WAPOR was David Jodis, who runs a company that does public opinion polls in multiple countries, and data was collected by Ksenia Kizanova, who has been is now the executive director of WAPOR and affiliated with the European research. Let me say a few things about what we asked. We wanted people to tell us how opinion polls were conducted. Well, first of all, were they conducted? How were they conducted? Election polls, are they done? How are they conducted? What are the rules that they have to live with, the researchers have to live with? Are there topics they may not ask about? Have there been threats to opinion polling from the government? Now, for example, have there been prosecutions or for conducting or reporting election polls? And in a number of countries, in more than 20 countries, there has been one or the other. So we're talking about something that is a true threat. But the other thing we talked about, and it was something that mattered from the very beginning, is whether there were limits on how close to an election a public opinion poll can be reported. Are there embargoes, blackout periods that forbid the publication of polls, election polls, a certain time before an election? And, I probably should say that this number of days is sometimes one. It is in one country 90. Effectively, a 90-day embargo on publishing an election poll means you're not doing election polls. It's what you're finding out may have no bearing or no relationship to what happens on election day. So that's sort of the broad outline of what we did. We also asked people about their evaluations of the quality of opinion polls, their evaluation of the quality of the journalists who write about opinion polls, and several other questions about polling in their country. The people who responded, the people we asked, were national representatives, either from WAPOR or ESOMAR, and multiple people from ESOMAR participated in this, and so we had somebody in the country itself who could help us find out what the situation was on the ground.
So this research was conducted within 200 researchers over 157 countries, correct?
That's correct. That's correct. That's it's a lot, and it was a long process because it was hard sometimes to find the right person and then have them respond. This was not a 2-minute questionnaire. This took at least 20 minutes to complete. But the people were experts, and we assumed they were experts in their field.
It took at least 20 minutes to complete, and I cannot even imagine how long it took to process all the data that you retrieved from this. So it's quite elaborate research. You talk a lot about regional differences, so I have a question regarding safety, because how do safety concerns for pollsters vary across different regions? And did you have any insight about the measures that were taken to ensure their safety during the process?
Well, let me answer that in 3 parts. If we're talking about blackout periods before election polls, it's important to talk about Latin America and Europe, because in both places, more than 2/3 of the countries have limitations on when polls can be published before an election. But there are clear differences. In Europe, the embargoes usually last for 1 or 2 days, so very short period. Though there are some countries like Italy and Greece and 2 others that have 15-day embargo periods. So, it isn't 1 or 2 days in all of Europe. It's 1 or 2 days, however, in most of Europe, the countries that have embargoes. Latin America, on the other hand, the average length of a blackout period is 7 days. And literally, most countries have embargoes in Latin America. So it's a place where there's a lot of concern. There's also concern, I think, in Latin America, because when we ask people how safe interviewers are, those interviewers who go and talk to respondents face to face, when we ask people that, most places people think that, the interviewer's safe. Maybe not very safe, but somewhat safe. In Latin America, that's not true. You have more than 4 in 10 countries. The representative told us that interviewers were very unsafe, and you add to that, that's a big concern. Now, I know that many of us know about what has happened in Mexico a couple of times with the arrest of people conducting polls, their arrest, and in one cases, one interviewer was killed. So you can understand why there may be a certain perception in Latin America that's different from the rest of the world. So that's the embargo threat, but we also have other threats. One that's very striking occurs in the West Asia, North Africa region, where there are more limitations on what questions you can ask. Now, globally, there's not a huge, well, there's nearly 1 in 5 countries have some sort of limitation, governmental limitation on the questions that you can ask. There are taboo topics. Religion, asking about religion, is the one topic that sort of stands out here. And particularly asking about religion in countries in North Africa and West Asia, where twice as many countries, more than 4 in 10 countries, report that religion is a taboo topic. Now, we have other taboo topics, sometimes it's politics, but it affects fewer countries, so polling in fewer countries. And I probably should talk a little more about how people feel about polling. In most places, in most places, people believe, our respondents believe that polling is pretty good. They're not so sure about the way media reports on polls, however. So we have, this is good, this is not good. So there's a big opening there for training programs, for cooperation and working with journalists so they can understand polls better and they can report them better.
Now, since you mentioned this, I do have to go into some of the methodological concerns and misinterpretations from the polling data that happen, because when reading your report, I saw that it's a lot about misinformation. It's not necessarily that it's not to be trusted, but it's the misinformation, the misguidance that comes from that side. So what are some of the misinterpretations of polling data that occur, and some steps that can be taken so that we can educate the media and also the public? The public is very important in this one, to better understand, for example, the polling results.
What we try to do and what we've done at ESOMAR is produce documents that help people understand polls. What do you need to know about a poll in order to report it? How do you report it? How do you treat a poll? And so that's one thing. How do you recognize a fake poll? Because there are fake polls out there which have not been done or have been done incredibly poorly. How do you find out the methodological information that will help you judge how good a poll is? How much do you need to know? And then how do you write it up? I should say something about reporting, because our experts, who themselves are survey researchers or market researchers or opinion researchers, were fairly critical of journalists. Now, whether that's from personal experience or producing polls or personal experience in reading polls, I don't know. But this is something that has been a long-term problem. And there's really only 2 areas where there's even a large minority of countries report that they think the poll reporting is pretty good, and one of them is North America, because I think a lot of that has to do with the local association, the American Association for Public Opinion Research, that has worked very hard to develop training materials for journalists. Now, how many journalists read them? Hard to say, but at least it's there, and it's something that ESOMAR is now caring a great deal about, and trying to produce multiple documents on the website that take a brief amount of time to read. You can't count, I think, on a journalist spending 3 hours or 2 days learning about public opinion polling. They have a different job. But you can ask ask them to come and look at a 3-page document that could at least prevent them from making the most serious errors. So beyond the problem of misreporting, misinformation, pollsters also face problems and tell us that they face problems. Polling has become harder. It's become harder because of increased costs, because of budget cuts, a lot of financial issues. Some people note that it's the response rate that's dropped, and that bothers them. Well, it should. Some people aren't sure that people who conduct polls, all of them do it very well. Interestingly, this survey was done after the coronavirus epidemic, and our experts told us that, well, sometimes it helped and sometimes it hurt. It helped because people were home, easier to reach that way. It hurt because of other difficulties and the whole impact of living in the middle of a global pandemic.
Yeah, I can imagine that. But now that we touched upon um, fraudsters and we talked about fake polling, I want to talk about the future of polling because it can't die. It needs to keep going. So how can pollsters and researchers work to perhaps increase the credibility and the reliability of polls? Because it's a growing skepticism, like you said. It's people are becoming less and less inclined to respond to these polls. So any advice from your part?
Yeah, it's obviously a difficult question. I think that SMR and other global organizations have a big role to play on being active on this front, and in promoting what it has to offer, the help it can provide. And so I think that's an important piece of this. I think it's also the researchers themselves being very conscious of the potential weaknesses in studies they conduct. I mean, this has been a problem for decades. So this is not a new thing, but people overinterpret poll results, or they do things like assume that something that appears to be a trend is simply going to continue through the election, and that's just not the case. You really have to have a healthy skepticism about what you're finding and a healthy skepticism about the polls you see. Having said that, however, we do know that polling gets better at matching election results the closer it's done to an election, the nearer it's done to the election. That's why we worry about embargoes, because it keeps people from getting information as an election nears. And the only people who have that information might be the candidates, or those people who have access to it. It's important for news media to be covering polls. It's important for the people to see this information, especially important for them in multi-candidate races and multi-party systems where, the vote is not just him or her, him, her or her. That's not what the vote is. The vote is making a strategic choice as well in working out where your vote is going to matter the most. And that's something that polls can provide for voters. But it doesn't work if it's 3 weeks before the election and you hear nothing else after that.
Wise words from Kathy. I want to jump on that and ask for your word of advice for aspiring pollsters because SMR does really focus on the future researchers and the future professional. That's why we also have the yes um, part of our association. What advice would you give young researchers and pollsters that are entering the field today?
Well, I think it's important to recognize that the vast majority of SMR members probably do not do opinion polling or election polls. They are doing a whole lot of survey research and market research. So we may be talking to a minority here about about what to do good political polls. I think it's very important for people to read as much as they can, to make use of all the resources they have available, to try and understand the population and learn how to ask them questions that are going to elicit truthful answers, and also ask them questions that they're going to understand, because people may ask complicated questions or force people to go through lengthy questionnaires. Probably don't need to do that. You just need to be utterly conscious of what kind of impact you're having on the people who are hearing or reading your questionnaires. But no, associations have a huge role here, and associations on the national and the international level. I was thrilled to hear how many local national associations exist within ESOMAR. That's terrific. That's very helpful because then people can deal with questions on a local level in their own country.
Indeed, indeed. And that's also why we work with figures like yourself that bring the expertise and really help us be on top of our game and to play the role that is needed to um, improve the industry. Kathy, thank you so much for being with us today. Um, Kathy's report, ESOMAR and WAPOR Study on the Freedom to Conduct, publish and published opinion poll is on the website, on our ESOMAR website. We're going to put the link down below so that you can also download for yourself. It is worth the read. It's an important piece of information to read, especially this year that we have so many elections coming up. Thank you so much, Kathy. Stay tuned. This was just the beginning. Later today, we will host a session with Xavier Palacio, Claudio Gennaro, and Judith Passingham, focusing on the SMR 20 questions to help buyers of AI-based services for market research and insights. This was just the beginning. We have a full week ahead filled with exciting themes as we celebrate research. Remember that all events are happening on YouTube, so make sure to subscribe to SMR's YouTube channel and activate notifications to stay updated with our videos. I'll see you soon.